so much for being with us. Okay, so what is the difference between the skills living and the regular version? Is the content the same or different? And maybe we need to start, because there might be people who don't know what skills is.
Yes. So originally, probably more than 10 years ago now, we came up with skills, which was based on developmental levels. So we didn't go strictly by what development was showing about, we knew a baby walked before they talked. But we looked at every single aspect to see, like, in programming and creating treatment plans, how do you teach something? So one of the earliest skills is joint attention, which is being able to show someone of interest with your eyes and with your head, and and reading social cues is really difficult, but it comes at a really early age. But what we do is there's all these prerequisites. You have to be able to make eye contact, which is a deficit in ASD individuals, and then you have to be able to point, and you have to be able to do all these skills. So we had to teach all those skills first before you could actually teach joint attention. So a lot of skills, the basic curriculum is based on development, and we looked at a lot of standardized testing, looking at developmental criteria. When does a certain skill come? In the ASD community, is this true or not true? Are there prerequisites? So that's how the original curriculum was built for skills. When skills living, which is what actually people outside of CARD use, and if you're a CARD internal person, it's skills for life. Okay. That was a whole other issue, the naming. But we wanted a different, CARD people want what they want, and so that, that's what the name is for internally. But there are all these teenagers and adults coming in now, and there are all these skills that just needed to be taught. And the the individuals that come in teen years, they tend to really, their needs are completely different. Yeah. So it could be they've never had any intervention, therefore we're just starting out with functional language. Or it could be that they finished high school, but they have no friends, no job, no skills whatsoever, and we need to find something for them. And so as in skills, regular skills, there's 8 curricula, and it really is focused on development. In skills living or skills for life, we had to prepare for what are all the things that a teen or an adult would need to live independently. And so the curriculum area, there's 16 curriculum areas. That's a lot. And anything that was in the basic skills that we thought, okay, it's still relevant, we did pool a lot of those activities into skills for life. Okay. But there are all these other skills now too that are needed, such as independent living and personal responsibility and vocation, and all these other skills that are needed for these adults that aren't relevant to somebody below the age of 10. Right.
Like how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah, like well, there's adults who would say they don't need that now.
Right. Well, yes, there is that. But I mean, an 8-year-old, 10-year-old is not going to do that. But knowing how to manage your money, let's say that, not balancing a checkbook, you're not trying to accomplish that at 8 or 10 usually.
Yeah, and accessing your community, at an 8 or 10-year-old, you're hopefully still going to the library with your parents. You're not the one trying to get yourself a library card, although there are some kids who are independently doing that. Right. But it's not a skill that should be learned or would be helpful. Somebody hopefully is still guarding, watching them, parenting them. But for an adult, we had the other day, he had no clue like how to even fill out his insurance form. Yeah. He was coming into CARD, and we had to sit there and say one of the goals that we have for him that he would know his own health information. Yes. So he would be able to fill out his insurance card and what are my allergies? Do I have any preferences? What injuries I've had when they happened? Yes. So what we're finding with a lot of the adults coming is that's the basic part first because they have to get into CARD. Yeah. Yeah. And so we're helping them do these things that are really basic skills that an adult would do, and they will be able to take that information and be able to use it hopefully for the rest of their life.
So on a basic level, skills living is the teen adult curriculum. Yes. And it's very individual specific. Yes. Where skills, the regular skills, the skills for autism, is the developmental thing for everybody from birth through age 8, 10, 11.
8 to 10, 11, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And it's still pretty individualized because they take an assessment and it's individualized. But the truth of the matter is that 3-year-olds on the spectrum tend to need things that are similar to other 3-year-olds.
Just like if I'm looking at a kid, I'm going to say, do you play?
Yeah.
You need to learn how to play. But when you're coming in at 15 or 20 or 30, I'm not asking if you're playing anymore.
Right.
I'm asking, actually, the more appropriate is, what do you do in your free time?
Yes.
What is your leisure time spent doing? I'm not going to go back and teach you imaginative play, because adults don't really do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back and say, like, hey, where do you hang out with peers? Where do you do you have things that you do in your free time when you're alone that's productive?
It's targeted toward their specific needs.
And it's giving them the respect.
Yes, there's that,
You know, it's giving adults the respect, and the teens, the older teens, the respect that, there's all these things they didn't do, but there are still all these things they could do.
Yes.
And that's important.
Absolutely.
We want to give them respectfully according to their age.
Yeah.
What are they actually doing? What music are they listening to? Can they find other peers that are similar ages being able to do the same things? Accessing their community, really.
Yeah.
It's giving them skills where they can go out in the community and find people. And they don't need a lot of people. Yeah. But they need someone to be able to share it with.
Absolutely. So now, one of the questions that we do get about skills living on a regular basis, though, is it just for people who are very impacted, or is it just for people who are high functioning? Who's it for?
Well, that's why there's 16 curriculum areas, is because we're hitting the whole range.
Okay.
Because when they come in, we don't know what they have. Unfortunately, we still do get 20-year-olds who have no means of communication.
Right.
Functional communication. Therefore, we have a functional communication curriculum. And a lot of those activities in that curriculum, you can see in development, in the basic skills, because everybody needs functional communication.
Yes.
Or adaptive skills in the same way. Everybody needs to know how to use a utensil to eat, be able to brush their teeth. And those are things that we're working on, below age 5, hopefully. But if they come in at 20 and they still don't have those skills, we're going to go back and reach into those areas. And one thing about, for Skills for Living that's really different is, in skills, the basic skills, we ask you to do the whole assessment, because we just want to know where the holes are and how they impact each other. But in Skills for Life or Skills Living, the person comes in saying, this is what I want to work on.
Yeah.
And they can pick and choose which areas that they want to work on. They don't have to do the assessment for all 16 curricula.
Right.
They just do what they want to work on at that time.
And in fact, in all probability, no one would probably need all of the things in Skills for Living. You might, just focus on one part of it and ignore the rest of it. And another person would focus on this part of it, ignoring that part.
Yes.
It really is that tailored. You don't need the whole thing.
You don't need the whole thing. And a lot of it, you'll see some cross-referencing, but for the most part, it depends on what your need is in an adult. As a teen and an adult, what do you need? What do you want to work on? And a lot of times we get the independent adults who come in and say, this is what I want to work on. Yeah. Sometimes we'll get the teens or adults who come in and they have a caregiver saying, this is what we need to work on.
Yes.
And sometimes we get the teens who say, yeah, I want to do this, but I really don't want to do other things. And then you have to talk them into doing prerequisites.
Right. Well, and to be fair, if you don't know, there's one person that I really respect and admire on the autism spectrum who's an adult who for years was writing into us and saying, but I don't want friends.
Yes.
I don't want friends. I don't want to know about having friends. I'm not interested in having friends. I don't want lessons about that. Don't talk to me about having friends. And my position was always to him, I hear what you're saying, but until you know what it's like to have a friend, I'm not sure if you know what you're saying no to. Mm-hmm. And then he got a friend. And he said, okay, I get it now. And I'm glad that people kept pushing me to have a friend, because now I see how wonderful that is. And you're right, I didn't know what it would be like to have a friend. Well,
and there's the other range where I've had, adults tell me, yeah, I don't want a friend, or a kid want friends. I said, well, what do you really want to do though? What are those goals? And so many other goals involved where they had to interact with people, and okay, if you want to do this, you have to be able to go out and, speak appropriately, have that social interaction. Yes, you're not looking for a friend, but you're doing this for all these other goals. And then in that process, they realize, I kind of like social interaction. Yeah. I kind of like people. And it surprises them, in that process. And that in itself is a huge a huge a learning situation where it wasn't their goal, but they found something in the process that benefited them.
Okay.
They really loved.
Love that. All right, we're going to take a short break and come back with more questions. Before we go to break, though, I want to address a parent wrote in and said, is there a place to get funding for tracking grants, that they've already applied for a grant to ACT, which formally ACT today, and that there haven't been enough funds. And I know that continues to be a problem, unless they make enough money, they can't fulfill even half of the grants that they get requests. And a tracking device is a really important thing. I'm not aware of anybody else besides ACT today that really works for a tracking device. However, the reason why is because a lot more insurances are covering it, and sometimes your state has a mandate. The state of New York has a mandate. If you're in the state of New York, you can get a tracking device. They have to pay for it. But a lot of states now, your insurance will pay for it. So I would immediately pick up the phone, call your insurance provider and ask them what they need. Just don't even say, do you fund this? What do you need from me? Do you need a doctor's excuse? What do you need to have for my child to have a tracking device? It's a matter of life and death. And then if they say, oh, nope, I've looked it up and it's not covered, then write me back and we'll try another venue.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
So I know at least 2 or 3 years ago, I haven't heard it recently, but I know some of the health insurance companies have a nonprofit division.
Ah.
So I know like United Healthcare actually had a grant pool that they would take applications for these kinds of things.
Great point. Because I always love to tell people United Healthcare Children's Fund, you can apply for a grant of up to $5,000. Yeah. But if your insurance will pay for it first, do that and apply for the United Healthcare grant for your copay and other stuff that you need. But thank you for thinking of that, because that is another venue. Okay, but get that tracking device. Do what you have to do, and write me back or call me back if you have no luck, because we want to make sure you get one. It is a matter of life and death. But when we come back, we're going to answer a question who came in from we have names for some of our viewers. So our West Virginia mom has written in a question, and we're taking that next, so stick with us. Anyway, having said that, I promised we were going to get to our West Virginia mom. She says, hey, Shannon, West Virginia mom here. I had previously talked about my daughter repeating herself after every sentence. We very recently went to the doctor because she has also started screaming randomly, and it seems involuntary. Now we're being told it's likely Tourette's and need to see a neurology because she could have been misdiagnosed with high-functioning autism instead of Tourette's, because Tourette's mimics autism if there are no tics developed yet. And she's got 2 question marks there. I have never in my life heard this and want some insight as to whether or not Tourette's and autism are that closely related that I missed it. I feel like a failure, honestly, because I wasn't hearing my daughter properly when she said, my brain won't let me stop. I'm a robot. I didn't understand she literally meant it was involuntary. I'm being told that Tourette's also encompasses sensory processing, social pragmatic language, and inhibition issues. Is all of this true? And thanks and much love to you all. And much love to you back. I clearly don't know. How much do you know about Tourette's, Evelyn? And help us out. Save us. I love Eliana Vincent when she does this and she says, save yourself. So Evelyn, save us.
I have experience with Tourette's, both actually internally with our kids, as well as one of my best friends has 3 kids with Tourette's.
There we go.
And it's interesting how they do crossover. Don't beat yourself up that it's one versus the other, because either way, both can learn through ABA.
There we go. Yeah.
I mean, ABA can teach anybody, I think, any skill if you really, target it. But for the most part, if, your kids are still young, ABA only helped it, okay? With Tourette's, it's interesting in the sense that there is a lot of involuntary shrieks and tics and different things. And it happens a lot of times with most of the kids I know when anxiety actually increases. So when the kids are a little bit more stressed, their tics actually increase more. Okay. So a lot of what you're teaching a Tourette's child is coping skills and teaching them how to calm themselves. Because when they do calm themselves and they're able to recognize, okay, this is what's going on, you see a lot of their outside non-inhibitory type of behavior, actually it starts, you can't inhibit it.
Okay.
It actually a lot of times comes down. I have to say with Tourette's kids, medication is actually a really great place to start. Getting a really good neurologist that specializes in pediatrics and Tourette's. The thing is, with autism and Tourette's, there is a wide range on both ends. It is the spectrum, I feel like. Because I have Tourette's kids who just, there's a little bit of tics and you can't tell a lot, and then I have my ones that come in and they're, it's constant tics. Just try. Initially, it's just like trying to get some control on that. One thing that is similar with a lot of the kids that are on both is they're very concrete thinkers. And so, in the autism world, we always say, they're really black and white thinkers. They don't see the gray. I see that in the Tourette's kids a lot.
Okay.
I see that same similarity. The Tourette's kids, when they're actually focused, get more of the hints of what's going on around them. They can read social cues better. A lot of times, though, if they're ticking a lot, they don't focus and their attention isn't on that.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so like I had a 13-year-old who's getting bullied, a Tourette's kid, and he was saying somebody else was bullying him, and it turned out it was another ASD kid, but he didn't know to tell his mom that the kid had ASD, even though he knew.
Okay.
And so the mom's saying, this kid's like in my face, and then I just happened to go pick him up with the mom, and I saw him, and immediately from far away, I knew like, oh, this is a spectrum kid.
Right.
So immediately I asked him, I said, does this kid have autism? And he's like, yes. And I said, do you know what autism is? And he actually could tell me what autism was.
Right.
But I was like, okay, let's talk about it in terms of you.
Right.
And how this child interacts with you. And then he was like, oh. And then he knew, like, okay, I need to be a little bit more compassionate. He doesn't understand. And then it kind of like put the bullying into like a different court. Yeah. And because he just wasn't reading it enough, even though he knew this information about this other kid, he didn't put it in context. But when I actually would focus him, he was like, okay, I know what to do now. Like, and it's really interesting. So they don't have that, probably the social deficit.
And it sounds like that they have the perspective-taking piece that a lot of times our kids don't have.
Yes, they definitely have perspective-taking, but you have to stop them to actually think about the perspective-taking.
Okay.
So a lot of, and it's the same thing with a lot.
That's adults.
Well, and that's the ADHD kids too. A lot of ADHD kids are like so impulsive and going, and they never stop to read the cue that the other peer is really annoyed by what they're doing. And once you stop them, they're like, oh yeah.
But I think that's neurotypical adults in this society. When the thing that makes me the most frustrated now in life is that I go, we spend a lot of time teaching my son who's on the spectrum perspective taking, and I'm frequently standing there talking to somebody who's an adult who doesn't have a disability, like, no disability. Like, I leave room for the fact that maybe there's one that I can't see, but then you ask them and they go, no, I don't identify as being disabled. and they're not taking anybody else's perspective. I think that's rampant in the world.
Yeah, so with Tourette's, I would say definitely go to the neurologist. Okay. Go do a whole full evaluation, because medication actually has helped all the Tourette's kids I've worked with a lot.
Okay.
And just controlling the tics so that they have time to pay attention to what's going on around them.
Interesting.
A lot of kids with Tourette's, because they have the perspective taking, they actually are really embarrassed by all their tics. Oh. And that it creates the social avoidance.
Right.
And it looks like maybe they don't understand,
right,
that social piece. But a lot of it is they're very, because they have that perspective taking.
Yes.
And they know, like, I look weird, or so-and-so's making fun of me, or whatever it is. They know that it's not right. They don't know exactly what it is. So a lot of times I'd say seek the medical field. Go look and talk to a doctor, because medication actually helps so much of the Tourette's things. And then after that, you can see like what deficits are still there and not there. In my world, when people come in, they need an ASD diagnosis to get insurance funding.
Right.
But really, I tell the families, I actually don't really care about the diagnosis that much. I want to look at the child. What are they doing? What can't they do? And I'm going to address the deficits as they come, because overall it is improving quality of life.
Exactly.
In whatever form.
Now, I have a really probably not very intelligent question, but can you have autism and Tourette's?
Well, I'm guessing probably, like in the new diagnosis of autism.
Yeah.
It leaves room for the genetic.
Okay.
The specifier saying if it does come from a genetic disorder or some other disorder. So like when I started this 20 years ago, Rett's, which is another disorder, and it was a pervasive development disorder. Nobody knew anything about it, so I'd get Rett's kids who also had autism.
Yeah.
but now they know the genetics behind it. So now you could get ASD with a specifier that it's a genetic, Rett diagnosis. So there's a lot of changes, and for funding, that's usually the purposes of the diagnoses overall. But in terms of what you're teaching, it's all the same.
Okay. And for everybody watching, if you have a child with a Tourette's diagnosis, can that qualify you for ABA through your funding source?
I don't think there is any funding for it right now, for ABA.
Well,
I don't know. You need to look at it, but yeah, for those families with Tourette's, this is something to go into the community and say, hey, we need this help.
We're seeing more and more families getting ABA services with an ADHD diagnosis.
And that's just in the last 2 years. There was actually the research article that came out that said medication and ABA had the same effect on the ADHD kid.
Love that. And you don't have the side effects of the medicine when you're doing, okay.
And the thing is, I want to say, I always say, let's do the behavioral first before the medication, but there are some diagnoses that the medication just helps a lot.
Yes.
And the thing is, there are families who don't want to try any medication, and actually I would probably be in that camp. But what I've learned over the years is that, if medication could help, just to take the edge off.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to try it, because just because you're using the medication now doesn't mean they're going to be on it forever.
Right. Absolutely.
It just doesn't require. So don't rule one way or another out. Talk to your medical professional.
But I love that you're already at the neurologist, and
that's the place to be first.
Sending you a hug. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question here. Hi, ladies. Thank you for your uplifting show. My 5-year-old is having a hard time with his pronouns, mainly the I, me, and my pronouns. When I refer to myself, I use the correct pronoun. I recently heard the BA refer to herself in the third person. Should I change my style? Is it better? Is a better way to do it? Any other tips are appreciated. This is a hard thing, the pronoun thing.
Yeah, pronouns are kind of funny to me, because initially when I remember coming into this field, that was one of the markers, is that they used inappropriate pronouns, and it's the I and you and me part. They can use all the other ones because they're very clear and distinct.
Yeah.
But so your behavior analyst, I'm going to take a guess. I don't know what she was doing there. But one of the procedures in teaching a child to use the correct pronoun is a shaping and fading method. Okay. So if I was talking to you and I was teaching you how to use I would say, I, Evelyn, would like for you, Shannon, to blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then I would slowly fade out the third person name so that the kids start to figure out that I'm pairing them so that they're similar, and I'm showing them it's similar.
Right.
And where they're used. And that is a technique that a lot of behavior analysts use, where they pair the third person with the correct person pronoun.
Okay.
So I would say, I, Evelyn, would like you to blah, 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 blah,
Right.
Or you, Shannon, would do whatever the instruction is, and then I would slowly take away your name, fade out your name, fade out my name.
Right.
But just very methodically. So it's not, whether it's bad or not. But pronouns is one of those things where I always tell supervisors or BCBAs, it's one of those things you work on early, and it just kind of lingers over many years. Because I think you really do have to teach the kids how to use it, and then they have to to build it into their repertoire.
Yeah.
So I could have started pronouns on year 1 of ABA, and in year 4 still be doing some pronoun work, because I think initially they're trying to figure out what it is.
Right.
Like, what are these pronouns? And then at a certain point, they can self-correct.
Right.
And then at a certain point, they start making the changeover.
Okay.
And the fluency aspect of it.
So kind of like when you're working on a sound, because I know people go, oh, well, if you're going to work on it for 4 years, that sometimes feels frustrating and like we won't work on it. But, I know there are certain sounds that kids have difficulty making, like a TH sound. So we start working on it knowing that it's not going to change overnight. That we're in it for the long haul, but that is not a reason to just say, well, we're not going to work on it.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like it's central to a program for 4 years.
Right. Running in the background.
It's running in the background. It starts out very central as a specific lesson, and then it slowly goes to the generalization phase, and that generalization phase is probably where it takes the longest.
Okay. And
then building it into the fluency aspect, meaning in time matters. How fast am I talking that I'm able to make that switch on that pronoun?
Okay. So keep that in mind. Patience, patience, patience. Don't expect it to be overnight. I want to skip to a question. Hi, how many hours a week should my BCBA be training the behavioral assistant a week when they first start, and for how long?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah. That's a really big one. It depends. I can't give you a specific response to that one. You know, there is the theoretical knowledge aspect where, you know, there's a lot of online e-learning programs like through the Institute of Behavioral Training, right? There is a module where we can give it to the behavior therapist and say, okay, that we're training you, here's the background, and you're not spending the one-on-one time with the kid, you're just learning like, what is a discrete trial, what is a behavior, what is a function. You're really learning basics. So there's that aspect where you could give that training in another method where you don't need the BCBA there. Yeah. And parents can buy it and have their person train. And then there's the other aspect of the practicum and learning, where it is someone with experience is with a child and the behavior technician, and being able to prompt them and show them how to do it in that practical time. Yeah. It ranges quite a bit. I used to do a lot of training in our expansion or what we used to call workshops. When there wasn't an office nearby, I would fly, and I would spend 2 to 3 days, and they would be full days. They'd be 6 to 8 hours, where I'm with the people that the family have hired, and I'm going to train them all to do actual behavioral techniques, as well as teach them what my programming is, what my treatment plan is for their child. And in 2 or 3 days, maybe it'd be 18 to 20 hours, I could get them to a place where I could guide them by phone or video. Yeah. But it really depends. Some people pick it up faster, some people pick it up slower. But it really is letting your behavior analyst should have a checklist of things that this person needs to learn. Yeah. And being able to go through it and giving them feedback in real time and saying like, have you mastered the skill? Yes, you have mastered it. Let's go to the next target. You're doing, how are you implementing this area? And being able to go through. So there's the basic learning what ABA is and implementing it. And then there's learning the treatment plan for your child. Yes. That could be a whole different piece. Yeah. And then if that person is working with more than one child, so kids on the spectrum can be totally different. Yeah. So the treatment plans can be different. Even the methodology could be different. It's all ABA, but under ABA is the umbrella, and then there's just different ways. There's the discrete trial therapy, there's natural environment training, there's pivotal response, there's just all these, and you choose what is appropriate to the child that you're working with. And so it could be specific training that has to go for that the behavior technician. And just because the parent is asking this, it leads me to think that there's a bigger question here. Okay. Like, either the parent is, to me, this is what I read into it, that either the parent is saying, I think they're spending too much time on training and not actually doing therapy, or I hear every day from parents, I don't want somebody working with my child that isn't trained. And my thing that, I want to hug every parent who says that to me, because I was one of those people. I was like, my child is not a petri dish. They are not your guinea pig. I want the trained person. Give me the trained person. And now I make parents angry because I say, I know, I thought that, I felt that too. And you do want to have somebody on your team that is, a rock star and has been there and done that and seen that and has that kind of assurance. But what I learned 2020 hindsight was that all of the newer therapists, and I'm talking about card therapists, which means that they went through an extensive training before they ever got to my kid, but they were still new. That those are the therapists who ensured that we got where we wanted to go. Because as somebody explained to me, you're not trying to get your child to be able to interact with the best, most trained ABA professional in the world. You're trying to get them to be able to interact with the world. Yes. And those people don't know anything about ABA. Yes. And why not have them be with somebody who has a strong basic in ABA, but maybe doesn't know your kid and hasn't had all that many hours of experience, because they're the gateway to ensure that your child generalizes and to ensure that your child is ready for the world and the world is ready for your child. I am humbled now when I see my child interact with new people and have no problem whatsoever doing it, no matter what their accent is, no matter what their cadence is, how they What they look like.
What they look like, how they present. My child does much better than my husband or I in interacting with people. Sometimes I'm like, what did he say? And my son is like, what is wrong with you? He said this, and I'm like, I'm not like my hearing, but I couldn't hear the accent and I couldn't decode and whatever. But my son can, and he knows how to repair the conversation when he can't, because he had the right curriculum and because he didn't have people who always were like the best, highest, as a parent, that's what you want. You think you want. Give me the most trained ABA. I would like you. I would like for you, only you, to come and work with my child. And you would be brilliant, but having those other people really adds depth to the program and helps your child to generalize.
Yeah, that generalization piece. And also, it's one of the reasons we have a team of people. The child needs to know in a quick way that whether you are telling me this, you or you or you, it all means the same thing. Right. It might the words could be similar or very different, or the way you look, the sound. Knowing that, hey, you know what, I want this child to know that no matter what those issues are, it doesn't matter. The words I hear still mean this.
Right.
Or the facial expressions.
And I'm expected to respond in a certain way, to at least acknowledge that you asked me something.
And it has a meaning.
Yes.
There's meaning behind anybody that has interaction that's directed at me.
Yeah. And I wish that there was a way that we could, I say it from time to time on the show, and I think parents go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, because I didn't think of it that way. But I wish we could quiet parents' fears. They're always afraid that they're getting a new therapist who doesn't know what they're doing. And they come to me and run to me because they know I'm going to take their side and go, yes, no, I felt that way too. But then I tell them the other side and I go, but that's not helping you. You're actually getting in the way of your child getting better. And then nobody likes me. But that's okay. Exciting right now. It is time for Ask Evelyn Kung. And we're here with Evelyn. Isn't that magical how that just happened? She just appeared here. And you are an amazing person, madam. You've been working in this field for how many years?
26 or 7, something like that. I stopped counting.
An amazing amount of time. Came in as a therapist and have just continued to work in this field, and you travel all over the place. You're kind of like the magic touch. This is what parents say about you all the time. If you have the opportunity for Evelyn to come and have eyes on your case, it is a really good day in your life because amazing things happen. You just get things. You really do. You are a light, and everybody adores you. From the kids to the parents to the therapists, everybody just thinks of you as that wonderful, brilliant mothering mind who comes in and makes it all so simple. Often Evelyn will say the thing that everybody goes, oh, like, oh, why didn't I think of that? So I appreciate you, and I know that everybody else does. So, and we appreciate you. From time to time, you get to come in and play this with us, and people write in and ask questions. So first question comes to us from a mom who writes into us on a semi-regular basis. And she said, my son is 14, has ASD, ADHD, and has a learning disability. At times, my son can be aggressive when he feels he is being told off, doesn't understand what's going on, or doesn't get what he wants straight away. He can't control his reaction, and I'm trying to help him divert the aggression by hitting a pillow, squeezing a stress ball, taking deep breaths. We've been practicing these techniques in the hope that we can use them when the aggression happens, but without success. There have been incidents at school when he feels he's being told off, but he really hasn't. And he tells me that he wanted to hit the teacher, but he doesn't. Unfortunately, with myself and my husband, this is not the case. And if he gets upset, the aggression is directed to us. We've tried ignoring the behavior, but he's getting bigger and stronger. Is there anything else I can be doing to help him and try to break his aggressive cycle? And we're sending you hugs, first of all, right?
This is a tough situation. These kids actually are more prevalent now. I see them all the time. I've been seeing them for a long time, probably for the last 10 years, a lot. But they weren't the common kids that we would see. Part of it was because the diagnosis was less when you have somebody that's so high functioning. People tend to want to choose to stick to the ADHD and the learning disorder. And then the ASD kind of gets tagged on later on because, you know, he's too high functioning, or he can do so many things, or he just doesn't want to do it. You know, a lot of different attributes of causality are thrown at these kids. And I think it's so hard. So congratulations that you actually have all three and that you're acknowledging all three, because it's all three in effect. So kids like this, you know, if I could come and sit here and say, okay, this is what you should do for aggression, it would be a mistake on my own. Because it's not just one thing that's causing all the aggression. You know, from the behavior analyst point of view, it's probably what we would call multiply controlled behavior, which means sometimes he does it for attention, sometimes he does it to get him out of things so he can escape. Sometimes he does it just because he doesn't know what else to do. You know?
Okay.
Or sometimes he does it so he can get access to something. It's actually every single function across the spectrum of what functions of why we do things. And the aggression probably hits every single one, but it's different every single time. So you can't actually just have one intervention for all of it. It will never work. Congratulations in that he wants to feel like he wants to hit the teacher but does not.
Right.
That's great.
Yes.
It's a good, at least there's a stop point, and you know that part is controlled. But I do feel bad for all the families that have this kind of child, because the person that the child actually does get most angry at is their parents.
Yeah.
And the parents are the ones that become the target of the aggression and the frustration. And a lot of times it's just because they want to help and they're trying to do things. And they know their child best too. So they also know what reinforcers will help the kid. So the kid's like looking at the parents trying to get help, but when they can't, they just don't know what to do. And then that's when the target really comes into play. And first of all, just for these kids, what I've realized with a lot of them, because a lot of them are so intelligent. They know so much and they can see the difference between themselves and their peers. They can see that other people get access to things, have more friends, social things just come more easily, and they may not be able to express it, but they can see it because usually intelligence-wise, they're usually intact or really high functioning. Like intelligence is off across higher than most people. And the frustration that they see when they see that their peers have such an easy time is frustrating, but then they also see life as being really unfair because they don't know how to get access to all these things, and they can't figure it out, and they can't go read about it someplace. And you know, that frustration of life being unfair, we would all be upset.
Yeah.
You know, if we couldn't figure out how things worked, there would be a lot more of us
Absolutely.
being aggressive just because no one understands you.
Yes.
And though he talks, usually with these kids, there is a delay in language.
Okay.
And it's a delay in social language.
Which is a really important distinction,
yes.
right?
They talk a lot, but they use very few words.
Okay.
So they they speak on, these kids tend to speak very concretely. So everything that they say is very black and white, very concrete. But if that's the only way you talk, you're missing all the emotional aspects. You're missing physical states, how you feel, like are you cold, hot, a little bit cold, a little bit hot.
Right.
You're missing everything that has to do with emotions. You're missing an understanding of relationships because relationships aren't clear-cut. They're very much a continuum. So a lot of what's missing is what we would call flexibility, you know? Flexibility in language, because initially they just don't even have the vocabulary to do it. I was just on a call with a similar kid right now, and I was telling them, you know, the way he describes his continuum is it's my boyfriend or girlfriend, it's my friend, and that's it. There's nothing else, you know? Or you're my family or you're not. That's pretty much the three descriptions of his relationship.
So shades of gray are just like not there.
The whole continuum is missing. They only have the extreme ends. Right. And when life is seen like that, that means you're either always a success or you're always a failure. And that just, it's horrible. The kids, their confidence, how they feel about themselves, frustration. Like I did all that work and I'm not getting any benefits from it. If they see, I had a kid who was like doing calculus in like 10 years old or something. And he was insistent that he was not good at math. And for years and years, he just kept saying he was. And I was like, we even showed him like grades from his class, like to show him, and he was just always insistent. And finally I said, what is the one thing that makes you think that you're really bad? Like, what happens in the classroom, like what actually happens. And the fact that the teacher will walk by and be like, oh, you need to erase this. And just the act of erasing mean he failed. Because his idea was he was either going to be successful, which meant perfect,
right,
or he was a complete failure if he wasn't perfect.
Wow, so that's a lot of frustration. I can't even imagine. I mean, I know how I feel. I'm the world's worst about customer service. If I go into a store and I ask for something, and I always tell the example of I went into a Walmart store and said, do you have X, Y, and Z? And the woman said to me, she goes, well, that was X-lined, so, you know, and then didn't finish the sentence. And I said, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? And I have language, right? And I said, I don't know what that means. And she goes, well, it means it was X-lined.
What is that?
So does that mean you have it or you don't? And she goes, well, it was X-lined. And I asked like 13 different ways to find out, so does that mean it's in, you know, that it's gone? And she just kept answering with it's X-lined. And I got so mad, I had like a tantrum. And I said, would you stop saying that and use different words to tell me what X-line? I mean, I was a grown adult and having a tantrum in an aisle at Walmart because I could not get this woman to communicate in a way that I could understand.
Exactly.
I can't imagine what it would be like if that's almost every interaction you have. You have enough language to, you know, do some things, but not to get your needs met.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
And so for these kids, they can't life is just unfair.
Yeah.
They just see they don't even understand how things work. And a lot of times it is the flexibility. It starts with language, I always say, because they have to have some kind of baseline of what they understand. And it can't be something that they've been told. Because just because they can told and they can repeat back whatever the rule is doesn't mean they actually understand the rule. And that's the problem with these kids too, is they can remember anything, and especially if they've been told something repetitively, they'll know the rule is when I get mad I should hit a pillow. But in the reality of it, it doesn't help it at all. Okay. If I wanted to punch something, maybe hitting the pillow would work.
Right.
But if I'm frustrated because I've been trying to get access to something or someone or do something or learn how to do something and no one's telling me, hitting that pillow is not going to help at all.
Okay, so what can she do?
So, you know, I always say, like, this is where you start with the flexibility. Like, if I'm using skills, so skills is our card curriculum, is I always say start with flexibility and start with language. So that's under executive function.
All right.
Teach them how to describe all the continuum of, I usually choose something that they have an opinion on, like food. Almost everybody has an opinion about food.
Okay.
Or maybe places they go. So they have to learn that continuum of like, oh, I like it a little bit. I sort of like it. I kind of like it. I don't really care about that. You know, it's just a neutral thing. Or I don't really like that, but I will eat it.
Okay.
Or I like it when this happens.
Right.
Only. You know, like being able to describe all your feelings in between. Rarely in life do we say we love something or hate something.
Right.
At those extremes. Almost all our descriptions are in that gray, in that middle area. So if you can get kids to talk about all those, use those words in a non-aggressive topic or what they can identify as something you're trying to teach them.
Okay.
Do it with something that they really have a true opinion about.
Right.
And get them to learn that language. Then you take that language and you start applying it to social situations.
Okay, so these lessons are in skills. And for people who are new tuning in, skills is a tool. You can go to www.skills4, and it's the number 4 autism.com. You can do a free trial to check it out. The issue with skills, I'm just going to be honest, is that skills can do so many different things that often parents go in and they go, oh, this is overwhelming, I don't know what to do. And the truth is if you just focus on the one thing you went into it for and just do that, you'll find that it's an amazing tool. And then later on, if you discover, hey, you know, I want to learn about other things that Skills does, you know, for me, it's a lot like a Mac computer. I just want to check my email, right? So I'm just going to learn how to check the email. I'm not going to learn how to do everything else and edit, but you can on a Mac computer, right? But just go in to do what you want to do. So you were saying this is in the executive functions curriculum.
Well, I was going to say he's 14, so what might make it easier is there is a skills curriculum for older teens and adults, And even though 14 is kind of the cusp where you can go one or the other, it might be easier for you to use Skills Living. And it's skillsliving.com. And basically, it's for older teens and adults who come in, and there's 16 curriculum areas. And you basically choose what you want to work on. So if I'm only going to work on executive function, or I'm only working on social skills, you only have to do those 2 areas, the assessments that are at the start of each curriculum area, and then that'll help narrow things down for you a little bit more instead of everything else that's on there.
Because we talked about this 2 weeks ago, the fact that in Skills Living there's so much information that no individual would need all of it.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't, if there were things that you had deficits over here and you would be working on something over there, then you wouldn't need the stuff over here. It wouldn't be appropriate.
Yes.
And the vice versa.
Yes.
If you're working over here, you don't need the stuff over here, because let's face it, the spectrum just gets so much broader the older individuals get.
Yeah.
There are no 2 individuals that are going to need the same thing, and no one would need all of it.
Yes.
So don't even try to do all of it.
Yeah, just go at what you think your need is. You know, and go in, and maybe when you start it, you think, well, this doesn't quite meet it, but then you'll just look around and see, is there another area like personal responsibility? That's an area, and it's a smaller area because it's just basically how to take care of yourself.
And there is an area on self-regulation too, but what I love about Skills is that when you open up a lesson, it also tells you what the prerequisites are for it. It's like going to college. You go, oh, well, I want to take this class, but the prerequisites are this, this, and this. I have to have those before I can do that. So you need to, when you see that prerequisite, you need to go back and teach the earlier lesson. I think that what's really fascinating, and what I've heard from families, is that often when they go and teach the prerequisite, things happen, and getting to that lesson is either happens on its own, like it just like miraculously happens, or it's ever so much easier once they've got the prerequisite, because often the prerequisite that's missing is the problem.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be something you'd think of.
Well, that's why with this aspect of like the aggression and everything, I always go back to language, and people always say, wait, no, he talks.
Right.
And I'm like, well, he talks, but does he have the right words, the right vocabulary?
Especially to get their needs met, because aggression often is because it's as if somebody's holding, now correct me if I'm wrong, but it's as if somebody's holding up a sign saying, I can't get my needs met any other way, so I'm going to do this.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just one of these things where you're starting with language, and then you are building up with interventions. This is where you do want to talk to a BCBA, because you need to find out what are the functions at different times.
Yeah.
And sometimes actually these kids are bright enough where I actually just write it out for them. These are 4 things. Why are you being aggressive right now?
Yeah.
Do you want something? Are you trying to get out of something? You just are so frustrated you don't know what else to do, you know, or do you just want our attention?
Yeah.
And sometimes these kids they're good enough where they'll just be like, that one,
yeah,
you won't give me.
Right.
And then you have a way to address it, a better way to get something. And the thing is, when the kids are at the height of aggression or height of emotion, just like with adults, typical adults, you don't talk about things at that point.
Right.
They have to calm down first.
Right.
Once they calm down, then you can talk about it. You've stepped out of the emotion, and you can actually talk about ways to learn how to do this next time.
Right.
Like, what are better ways to get access to what you want? What are better ways to let us know you're frustrated without having to do this? And don't do it while they're frustrated.
Yeah.
They have to come down first from whatever, emotional high they're at.
Yeah.
And once they're calm and you can talk about separately, they're much more logical, much more being able to reason out. And it's important that you just don't give them rules too. You can give them a rule because that will get them so far, but you also have to go back and talk about all the reasons for the rules, and that requires flexibility. They're not only going to see it in one place. There's a lot of reasons why, they're getting mad.
Yeah.
And
now, I happen to know that this mom is not in the United States. She's in a country where BCBAs are even more scarce than anywhere else. So normally we would absolutely be talking about make sure that you have a BCBA working with you on protecting yourself and stances that you can take and ways that you can de-escalate and ways that you can prevent yourself from getting hurt and the individual from hurting you or hurting themselves. But what can somebody do if they're in a place where there's no BCBA? Are there trainings online to show parents how to deflect and how to, I know that, I know that entities have these videos that they use internally and that they don't typically share them with parents because everybody's afraid that a parent will misuse the information and end up getting more hurt. And I think that's a real thing. But what is available for parents?
I think a lot of times it's like we have IBT, the Institute for Behavioral Training. They have a lot of videos. I don't know if they would have the exact one that you want, but those are valuable because they can tell you just how to guide and functional behavior.
Yeah.
And they can teach you just how to identify it, and then you can teach your son too how to identify it. And that just gives them more power.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because of this reason, and at least then you know
yeah.
what area he's in,
yes.
so that you can have more discussion.
Yeah.
Or, coping strategies are good as long as the kids, the typical coping strategies work, except they can't just be rules. The kids have to understand it for them to actually use it.
Yeah.
It doesn't become effective. Otherwise, they're breathing, but they're not calming down.
Right.
They're trying to do that. And there's some physiological aspect where if they do learn how to breathe slowly and breathe out slowly, just the oxygen will calm them down.
Yeah.
And a lot of our kids, I'll actually tell them, but a lot of times they don't do it right. They end up making themselves more hyper because they're breathing fast instead.
Yes.
So it's like, no, we're going to count to 10 and breathe out. And then it's funny because inevitably, even if they've been doing it a long time, they look at me and they say, "This is taking a long time." It's like, it's true. That's part of the effectiveness. If you
right.
get fast, it doesn't help.
Right. Well, I have to say, I've in recent years, I've become a big advocate of mindfulness. We have our mindfulness moment on Thursdays. And then 2 weeks ago, when I was at ABAI International Autism Conference, they had a workshop on mindfulness. And it was very eye-opening for me because I didn't know all the research that is behind mindfulness now. When used in conjunction with ABA, it makes ABA more effective. And that's doing mindfulness with everybody, with the individual who's on the spectrum, with the parent or caregiver, and the team that's working. If everybody is doing the mindfulness, everything is much more effective. Even if just one element of that three-legged stool is doing mindfulness, the ABA is more effective. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about that this year. But for the mom to, for you to find some strategies so that you have time during the day to be calm. Because I know when you're being hit and you don't know when it's going to happen, you're constantly feeling like it could happen at any moment. So finding a time during the day when you can ratchet that stress down, and also finding time to do that with the individual, it's like an insurance policy.
Well, one of the things that does work that with some of our kids, and families actually have a really hard time in putting it into place, and I saw it actually as a part of a therapy program, at a living, is they have this thing where if you're getting mad, the rule in the house is you have to go to your own room for 10 minutes.
Okay.
They set a timer, and in 10 minutes you can come out and we can talk about it.
Okay.
And usually that 10 minutes, the kids calm down, and at the 10 minutes they tell the kid you can either come talk about it or you can choose not to, and that way the kids can decide, is it worth it? Because to talk about it takes
energy
problem too. So it takes a lot of energy and so many things. And when they come out at 10 minutes, only that person talks. No one else can talk. Okay. If you have a rebuttal, you take another 10 minutes. And this is the part actually that parents have the hardest time implementing.
Right, I'm sure.
Is because they just want to respond back, and we're like, nope, the kid needs to feel heard.
That's right.
And so if the 10 minutes, no interruptions, no questions, no anything, and then you have to do another 10 minutes, and then the parents can come back, and then the parents get the right to talk without the kid interrupting.
I like this a lot.
And it works really well.
Okay.
It just takes a long time.
Yeah.
And putting it into place, you have to be very mindful about when you're doing it.
Okay.
But it really is something that is effective because then the kids feel heard, and then the parents feel heard too.
I would imagine in the beginning has to be a reinforcer for participating in the rules of the 10 minutes.
Yes.
Because when you're starting to feel angry, if you're used to getting it to a fruition where you get to hit somebody, when it starts to escalate, saying, okay, we've agreed you're going to go to your room for 10 minutes, there's got to be something in place like, and if you will participate in these rules, you will get
Yes.
X,
And
Y,
then
or Z.
initially it's immediate.
Right.
It's like you have to give an immediate reinforcer for responding, following this rule in this way.
Okay.
But there's a lot of issues. I wish I could just say there was one way to treat this.
Right.
But there isn't one way.
That'll give her some things to think about.
Just some things, and you can roam around, and even with mindfulness, I love mindfulness. I don't know the ABA research recently. I know it from maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But one of the main issues with mindfulness, if you're bringing it over from somewhere else, is it goes back to vocabulary. Half of our kids don't even understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So the vocabulary part becomes really important about, the vocabulary used for mindfulness, because I'll ask the kids later what they know. They're like, they only know the definition that whoever told them, but it has no meaning to their life, or have very little meaning, or it's not generalized and only has like one little corner. So then you're stuck because you're trying to do this mindfulness, and they're just like over here still, and you think they were down here already.
I saw this amazing workshop, and I heard 2 different workshops where they were talking about, there's a technique called surfing the wave. And you can Google that. I'm going to get somebody on the show to talk about it. There are lots of different techniques of mindfulness, but there's this thing called surfing the wave, and it's very specific and targeted and teaches them how to have the emotion that they're having and to ride it, to let it ebb and flow so that it goes through them and doesn't stick and escalate. That I thought was pretty amazing. Lots of other techniques too, but that's one that you can Google. Surfing the wave, mindfulness, and see what you come up with. Hi, and thanks for your show. I'm using skills for my 5-year-old. How many programs curriculum should I run for a 25-hour program? The main focus is on language and social. He can request and label, but not conversational, or be able to answer more open questions like, what did you do at school today? He can answer, who did you play with? It's usually the same person, but at least he has a friend in this typical school setting. He has difficult with completing academic tasks and independently and with abstract academic concepts. He can memorize things, but understanding the concepts are harder for him. He has difficulty with attention and attending as well. Thanks for any suggestions so I can get started. And let's keep in mind, this is a 5-year-old. So, all those things, there's a continuum, but we don't expect a 5-year-old to be brilliant at a lot of the things on this list, right? And I just say that because I think a lot of times, we have these expectations based on another child or something of, I just always loved the parent who came to me and said that on the IEP, they had asked that the goal was for the 4-year-old to be able to attend for an hour. And I was like, who put that there? That's not even realistic for anybody at 5.
It's so difficult.
Or 4, yeah.
I mean, there's kindergarten. I mean, this year I was talking to a mom of a typical kid, and they pulled out recess in preschool, the 4-year-old class. And it was like, why did you? They're like, we need more instruction time. And it was like, is your kid really going to be listening if there's no place to run around in the middle?
Break, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, okay. So I wish I had a quick answer for this. My typical response, actually, off the top of my head, he's 5. He should still be in a 40-hour program.
There we go.
I mean, honestly, he should be in a 40-hour program. Maybe 10 of those hours are in school, helping him learn how to attend to the classroom, learning to attend teachers, working on peer play interaction. But the 25 hours remaining should probably be in the one-to-one setting, still working on getting to that level of, understanding abstract information, learning abstract concepts.
And you're being so kind, and you're a clinician and you like to be kind and political. But the truth of the matter is, for this mom, if you've got a 5-year-old and you want them to go to school, studies show that a 40-hour program of intensive ABA is what gets it done. So, if you're doing it with skills at home, and it is your time, but the truth of the matter is, and Dr. Grampiche doesn't say 40 hours, she says every waking hour. Why are you stopping at 25 is the question. Don't do this halfway. If you're going to take the time, do this all the way. And get somebody in the neighborhood, call the local Kiwanis Club if you have to, get somebody else trained to help you. But the real question she wanted to know is how many programs should you be running in a 25-hour program?
I would say that if he is not at the conversational level yet, you're probably looking at around 30 programs.
30 programs, okay.
Or 30 activities.
Okay.
So it's lessons is a big one, and activities, many activities below a lesson.
Yes.
So I'd say around 30 activities. But as the information becomes harder to grasp and it's less easy to memorize and to really learn, the number comes down pretty quickly.
Okay.
Like when you get to learning theory of mind or executive functions attend, then your actual number of lessons in a 24-hour program is probably going to be down near 15 or 20.
And keep in mind that some lessons you're going to do more frequently and others you're going to do less frequently. They don't all have the same weight.
No, they don't have the same weight. And just like we were saying, if you had 25 hours and you're only working on pure high functioning lessons, you're probably down at 10 or 15 lessons.
Okay.
But if you're still at the process where there's just a lot of memorization going on, then you're probably near the 25, 30.
Okay.
So it just depends.
Can I tell you how much we appreciate you? You are just such a wonderful, wonderful light, and we've all enjoyed this, and we love any time we get to have you here to answer questions, and thank you so much. It's so meaningful to me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, it's going to be time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson is joining me, and our special guest today is licensed in marriage and family therapist. I put too many ands in there. Licensed marriage and family therapist Vince Redmond, and we're going to be talking today about depression. We're at the end of January. There's less light right now than ever. We've had more parents and more clients and more people on the spectrum writing to us about feeling low in the last couple of weeks. So we're really going to take it on and talk about depression and what you can do and the different kinds of depression. So all that plus in the news coming up after these messages. Stick with us.